Greetings, I'm Ruben Martinez, and I want to welcome you to another forum of FutureU, which focuses on neoliberalism and higher education. Adrian Lenardic, who is a professor of Earth, Environmental, and Planetary Science at Rice University. He is originally from Croatia and has been with us in previous forums and also submitted a couple or maybe three commentaries, very insightful ones that have received a lot of attention. And so he's going to join us in the conversation.
Thanks, Ruben. So I started as a faculty member in 2000, probably around 2010, I started to notice a shift. Before that, like any professor who's untenured, yeah, my nose was down, so I wasn't really looking around. I couldn't really see the things going on. Once I started noticing the shift, and honestly, when I actually had the time to really think about this, was in the before times, so 2020, when all of us had more time to think about things than we might have wanted to. I actually started looking around. Advice I had gotten from my mentors about what the academy was and what brought me into the academy had changed completely. And part of this was noticing a large administrative bloat while budgets were being cut and wondering what's going on. One of the things I found really useful for me with FutureU is I had this sense, and I think many of my colleagues do, of wondering, am I the only one seeing this, right? What is actually going on? And searching for a name for it led me to do the research Frank did, and that's how I found you guys and started, kind of contributing, doing my thing. I think one of the other perspectives I can add, something I did notice was that there was this thought, and whether it's propagated or not, that all of this complaining, if you like, about neoliberalism, or if you like, an economic view of how universities should run, that they should be efficient, cost-cutting, business-like, was only affecting the humanities and the social sciences. And as somebody in the natural sciences, I found that to be objectionable and certainly not correct. It is having an effect on the way natural sciences are done, the way sciences are done, and really on the whole idea of what we used to call public knowledge, that now everything has become privatized. Connections to corporations within universities for research, the things I do, really started to worry me. And that's one of the other perspectives that drew me into this, that I could actually contribute in some sense from the natural sciences as well. One of my other interests is thinking about how systems work, and that includes economic systems and the university system. There is an awareness that is still missing, and it's an awareness internally. A lot of my colleagues within the university still aren't really able to articulate what's going on. They sense it, but they're not aware. And part of that is actually getting the information out there. I started to take a economic view of everything, that everything runs like a business. And once that moved into what used to be called public goods, that kind of set off my worry from the university standpoint. And when I saw this kind of move, I thought initially, well, this is mostly economics, but it's kind of naive to say you can separate economics from politics, and I've realized you can't. I will echo what Frank said. The degree to which they came together is now somewhat surprising, but I guess in retrospect, if I look back on it, it's maybe not so surprising. So what I started to see at universities was kind of this push of telling students, right, that the be all and end all is not just to get a job that you enjoy, but to get a high paying job, that became success in life. The word entrepreneur started permeating my university to a ridiculous degree, that everybody had to be an entrepreneur of the self. Success was redefined, and the idea of what is public value, public good seemed to disappear. Now, looking at this through the neoliberal lens, if you start to say there is no such thing as society, well, it's a short step to saying there is no such thing as the public good. There's just individuals fighting it out. The market is the decider of all. It's the arbitrator. It tells you what is good and what is not. My thinking is the original people who started thinking about neoliberalism probably didn't see the fascist neoliberalism coming, and I think it's overly reductive to say, neoliberalism is what really caused democracy to go downhill, but it sure contributed, right? Once you actually go into this mode of pure economic thought, and you're applying it everywhere, everywhere. I mean, from hospitals to higher education, you're kind of wiping out the idea of equality, which, demos, democracy, political equality, one vote, everybody has a say, all this. And you kind of set yourself up to say, okay, well, from the business view, I mean, it's winners and losers. People who stand in your way are the competition, and you've opened the door. You've completely opened the door. And then you do start to have a societal effect. And that, to me, is what I'm kind of struggling with now, seeing it happen. The other thing I'm struggling with is seeing that I can only speak to my own university. A lot of universities seem to be doubling down on the student as customer model, not seeing what it's doing to the long-term value of democracy itself. It's almost like hiding your head in the sand, which again is one of the reasons I think, university FutureU coming out is a great thing, just to get people aware that this idea of what's become known as TINA, right? There is no alternative, is not correct, right? That you have to actually see there's another way of doing it. And it's also a long game that I think universities are starting to miss, right? That we're the ones who educate the future generations. If the future generations are told, right, that you have to take an entrepreneurial view, then right, they're gonna succumb to these very extreme kind of right-wing views, which are kind of couched around you will have success. There is no public value, there is no public good. For me, also on the natural sciences side, now every grant has to be connected to something that's patentable. The idea that actually you can put out information that can be used by the public now is not of value, that students are being conditioned to the fact that they have to team up with startups, and that's the way to help the good. I just don't see that as correct. The other thing that worries me is that we fall into this trap of either or, that it's one way or the other. Business models are great for business, they're great for corporation, but that doesn't mean they're great for universities and certainly not great for governments. So, right in 2016, Jared Kushner said the government should run as an American corporation. And if one steps back and says, wait a minute, right? Are citizens the customers or are they actually the boss? You've kind of subverted this whole thing. And I see that in microcosm happening at the universities when they actually adopt this neoliberalist view. And that to me is certainly a worry. So I guess at the end of the day, I can say to your question, neoliberalism, I mean, that economic view, it opened the door for what we're seeing happening politically. And the idea that it was a moral free it's not correct, right? And we're getting what, the slow train wreck I think that Rubin and Frank saw coming in 2015. It's here, yeah, that the university can serve two purposes, that it actually can provide vocational training and can also provide its historical value, which is actually to have students educated more broadly for things that allow them to step into the world. And since we're talking politics, to actually step into the world as citizens, right? The idea of liberal arts, liberal free arts skill was actually that you're training a free citizen who can actually evaluate things beyond just their own vocation. From the standpoint of the student as customer model, this is also the either or. I don't think this should be a right or left. If you lean toward vocational training, you should be as upset by this as anybody else, ignoring the economic reality. No, it's actually acknowledging it 100%, right? And this is again part of the either or, that the university has to run like a business. Not everything has to run like a business. So do we abandon the idea that a part of education goes beyond vocational training, that it's actually to train citizens? And it doesn't matter if you're left or right, right? Do you want your child to be trained to actually be able to contribute to the politics, if you like, to society, if you like? Do you want them to have that broader view, or are you just interested in them becoming a CEO? That's the economic side I think some of us have a problem with. We certainly acknowledge parents saying, hey, I want my kid to have a good job. Your tuition is going up. Why is that? Well, with that, that's also the part of the university becoming a business, right? My university now has 14 vice presidents. They all make about 400K a year, right? Tuition continues to go up. A lot of what they're serving is no longer education. I think having this kind of whitewashed away and painted into an overly political mode is also a little damaging, right? I have right-wing parent friends who are also upset about this, right? That's a practicality. And I guess that was my kind of answer to your economic little query there. And I think it is reasonable, and I think it is something we have to address, right? That there is this reality. There are parents and students who do want this from the school, but the question is, right, does it really have to be one or the other? And it doesn't. And if you push it toward the one vocational, right, then students are nothing more than human capital. You're just training them in a pipeline to go down to the business. But the businesses would never accept what should be inevitable. If that's the case, they should be paying for the tuition, not the parents. They won't accept that, right? And that's also part of what Frank was saying. There's a lot of corporate capture happening at universities now, right? Deloitte interviews at my university, all these places interview at my university. The university as a place of actual freedom is what's being subverted, right? And I got it. A corporation is not a place of freedom. Do we want the university to maintain that? And I don't want to be overly hyperbolic, but it could be one of the last bastions that could do that. The university teaches by what it is, right? So what the university projects outward is what people will see. We have to actually be willing to be a little bit self-critical, right? That some of the steps along the way were actually, things that we contributed to. So we can actually work to have the university be what we want it to be. I read a disturbing study, and I forget the authors, but they actually went through various liberal arts universities and they asked the people there, from the professors to the graduate students, what to you defines a liberal arts education? And depressingly, right, they had a list of 10 things that defined liberal arts, and they would have taken a correct answer if anybody answered two of those. Less than 20% of the people could actually answer that question, right? So this question of what is a university for, I think is something we've neglected within the university system to our own regret. And that's when you have somebody coming in and saying higher education is the enemy. You can't defend what you don't know, right? So even with incoming students now, I've actually tried to tell my colleagues, just try to have a discussion with them about what they think a university is for, why they are here, what they see as liberal arts being. This might help break a left-right divide. And the left-right divide, to me, I see it in microcosm when I see neoliberalism and liberal arts, and one is seen as right, one is seen as left. They are both based on freedom, right? And it's a freedom of a different sort. It's an economic freedom, and then it's a freedom for civil activities and things like that. I think the best I can do is educate students coming in and some of my colleagues that those two do not need to be mutually exclusive.